Hello, and welcome back to another episode for Project Seed Money. My name is Sharissa Bradley, and I am so excited to bring you an interview today with author Toby Dorr. Thank you so much for being here, and I really hope you enjoy this interview. Welcome, Toby, and thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that you agreed to do this interview with us for Project Seed Money and just help us to inspire as many female authors as we possibly can.
I'm so glad to be here. I think everyone has a story. And even if we tell somewhat similar stories to someone else, we'll tell it in our own unique way. And that unique way will reach the unique person who's been waiting to hear it. So I think it's important for all of us to tell our stories.
Couldn't agree more. And sometimes, even though it does seem like we do have some more similar stories coming up, and I think that that could be a discouraging thing for someone. Well, it's not that unique. I heard someone tell me, well, my story isn't that different from everybody else. And you're right. I think actually it is completely different because we would tell it differently.
Yes, yes. And, I think there's someone out there waiting to hear your story. So my thought was if I just reach one person with my story and it makes a difference in their life, well, then there you go. That was worth all the trouble of writing and publishing that book. So that's why I write.
Did you always write, or did writing come to you later in life?
I always wrote. I used to write little stories about my dogs and little stories about things. When I worked at Sprint, I'd send my little stories around and everybody'd say, Toby, you're going to be a writer. And I always thought, no, I can never write a whole book. And then I had an event happen in my life that was so huge and all over the news that was compelled to tell my story. And the strange thing is, some days it's so hard to sit down and write, but you just do it anyway. And I never had any rules about I'm going to write so many words a day, or I'm going to write 5 days a week, or I'm going to write from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. I never had any of that. I just wrote when I felt called to sit down and write, because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to meet deadlines that we impose that don't really matter to anyone else. And so I think the best way to write a book is to just sit down and write it. And don't worry about grammar or spelling or tense or any of that, because that comes later. There's so much editing that happens later. So just sit down and write it one word at a time. And anybody can do that.
Did you end up going a traditional route for publishing? Did you hybrid publish? Did you self-publish?
I did get an agent for my book, and it was during COVID. And so after 18 months, there was no movement on it. And I actually canceled the contract with my agent. And then I went with a small publisher, Grace Point Publishing, and they published my book. They're a small publishing company based in Colorado, and they publish, I don't know, dozens of books every year. And I've been really pleased with it. But I'll tell you, when you write a book, especially mine was a memoir, so it was so personal, you have to be willing, because when you go through the editing stage, oh, it's so painful because people are changing the things that you wrote or suggesting ways to make it better. I had editors, which felt so blessed for, who didn't make changes themselves. They would just suggest to me, I think you could do this, or what if you did this? And then I did the writing myself. But editing, boy, I must have rewritten that book a dozen times. But each time it became so much stronger and so much better. So don't ever you skimp on the editing part, because it really is what makes your book the book it's meant to be, I think.
I completely agree. We do a whole series about just professional editing and not skipping that part, because that's the polishing. That's that really making something feel clear, clear,
Mhm.
really.
Yes. And, sometimes people will reach out to friends and have them read their book and comment and edit it. But you need to go to someone who doesn't know you or your story, because you can't edit without any prejudice. And you want to tell them, oh, what a good job they did. But that's not what you need to hear in editing.
I love you, and change this whole chapter.
Yes. Yes. I remember my developmental editor said, okay, I think we've got the book edited the way it should be. and here's your next step. It's called a side-by-side rewrite. And I was like, what? She said, open your manuscript on one screen and open a blank document on the other and just read the chapter and write your book. So I wrote it, but it was the best thing because I picked up things that I didn't pick up before. So, I rewrote the whole book just months before it was published. And that just strengthened it too. But what an exercise. I said, can I just copy and paste? And she said, no, no, you're going to
Because
read
that's editing.
it. Yes. Yes. And that was such a great exercise. And I don't think I'd ever write anything else without doing that side by side rewrite right at the end because it just was really powerful.
I'm taking the note. I know that I get to edit this video and I get to rehear it personally, but no, that's brilliant. And also to recommend to people this process is going to be a different timeline than you could even imagine it. Shorter or longer, either way. I had an author on a couple weeks ago, Paula Banks, and she wanted to write her book by the end of the year, and it was published by February. Like sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's, but sometimes it's rewriting your entire book.
Yes.
The editing process. So editing is going to come back on you, and it's a months long job or sometimes longer. So that time changes.
Yes, it does. And even though I did so much editing, really, we got it done in like a couple of months because I was on it. At that moment, I was into it. And then the last thing we did before I sent it back and said, okay, it's finished, my husband and I sat down and we had Microsoft Word read the whole manuscript to us.
Oh.
And when you hear it, even though Microsoft voices are pretty corny, but hearing someone else read it to you, you can't read it yourself because you're not removed enough. But when you're so removed and something else is reading the book to you, you hear things like, wait a minute, I said pretend just a little bit before. I don't want to use pretend twice on the same page. And so that's when you pick up those kinds of things. And so that was the final edit that we did, my husband and I, was just listening and picking up repetitions or things that didn't have the right kind of cadence and sound when you said them out loud. So
it's so good. And there, as it is now, there are so many technologies that do this for you now. Applications that will read for you. I used to struggle with dyslexia. I have a lot of tools now for myself. But when I look into like dyslexic tools for my children, there are now a lot of specialty tools. Like they read for you. They'll like double the speed. You can take a picture of the page. It will read and track for you so that you can see it. So like that's
so that you're learning.
Yeah, because with dyslexic challenges, our eyes tend to skip around the pages. And so there's even these tools that will help you like see it as it reads it to you. So quite a few tools.
Yes.
Looking not even just in the author world, but if you kind of look into those learning disability type tools, there's a wealth there as well.
Yes, there are. And I just thought it was amazing that Microsoft Word could read my manuscript to me. But hearing it is definitely an edit you shouldn't leave out because we picked up things in the hearing it that we didn't see in the reading it.
I never, ever have heard this before. I'm so glad you said that. That's such a cool tip. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What was the writing process like for you as far as getting yourself from that conception of, okay, you now determined I've got this story, this life event, these things are happening. My story is out in the media, right? I've got to say the right things or not say the right things, but maybe say the story now. What got you from that part? Because that's all mental to getting it actually sitting in front of the computer, actually on pen to paper to book.
My husband was a great support and he has a master's degree in professional writing. So he loves to write. So he really pushed me and coached me and I would start and then he would read and he'd say, what if this was your first sentence? And, just help me refine it. And so then once you get started, I think it just kind of comes. But the hardest thing to do is to start. because you're kind of committing yourself to some, people say, when I write my book, or one day I'm going to write a book. One day and then you sit down to write it, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's here. Now I'm doing it. And I can no longer say, oh, one day when I write my book, because now I'm writing it. And now I say, what if nobody reads it? That you kind of turn into a whole different trajectory. But you can't any longer say one day when I write my book. And I think that's something a lot of potential writers lean on. Well, it's not time yet, but one day when I write my book. Well, when you sit down and start it, I mean, you're doing it. And now you've got to say, I'm writing my book.
And what a scary, scary moment too.
Yes.
Full of vulnerability, full of for myself, self-criticism, just overwhelming self-criticism, like battling that next step.
Yes. Yes. And I was writing a memoir. So it's so personal, and it has to be personal, and it has to be raw, and you have to open yourself up and bleed on the pages. And that was difficult. And a lot of times I think, why can't I just write a story where I make up something? But that's not what I'm called to do. When I was going through and editing and doing the side by side rewrite, and at the end of the day, my husband would say, where are you today, Toby? And I'd say, oh, I'm on suicide watch in the prison. And he'd say, oh, I'll be glad when you get out of that, because that's a tough place to be, isn't it, Toby? And it's like, yes, it's a tough place to be. I need to get out of this little piece of it. So you put yourself back in it, and you relive things, and you feel things, which you need to do if you're going to write a memoir. You also need to give yourself space, because sometimes if something's so difficult, it's okay to get up and walk away and go sit outside and listen to the birds sing, or get in the car and go for a drive. You don't have to force yourself to do a time clock, and that's just not a way of writing that works for me.
I could see it being really useful in the fiction world when you're building character development and you're needing to create storylines and storyboard and these type of exercises where you're sitting for 2 hours a day or 5 hours a day or write 2,000 words a day. That makes a lot of sense. Like you said, you're making something up. But
Yeah.
the women that we are trying to support at Project Seed Money are all memoir writers. We want to encourage.
Oh, excellent.
That's
Excellent.
Yes, that's what this platform is actually encouraging, is
Mhm.
writing their own story, because I personally believe, as you said at the beginning, that everybody has a story. And what happened during the last 4 years of the world is we were really separated.
Mhm.
Really
Right.
separated. And I feel that the way to come back to connection is the way that we always have come back through connection, and that is through storytelling.
Mhm.
And when we share our stories, we become a community inside of our own living room, my own
Yes, that's
home,
right.
my
Yeah.
own dining table, my own bed, and my own pillow, in my own safety and comfort. I am connected to you
Mhm.
through your story. And no longer are we feeling this separation. I'm alone. I'm by myself. I have no one to lean on. I am now with you in your story, and I am connected to you in our similarities and our pain and our kinship that we share through that. And that is actually where Project Seed Money came from, because it is such a challenge to come up with the funding to do these things, right? It's not
Yes,
write
it
your
is.
book.
That's
Um,
right.
Even to take the time to spend to write your book, not everybody can afford to take a little time off of work or
Mhm.
time away to write your book. We have had all different types of authors on this platform, but my dear and closest to my heart is memoir writers, because that is truly what I'm trying to encourage.
Yes. And the unique thing about memoir writers is, at least I felt that I went through some really rough, difficult times. But I felt like if I shared my story of how I got through that, it might help someone else get through a difficult time in their life. So I think memoirs just kind of feel called to share, to try to help other people. And if you're writing a memoir, I think one of the best things you can do is read memoirs, read other people's memoirs, And I really fixated on Jeanette Walls and the Glass Castle because that was a difficult story that was somewhat embarrassing to tell, but she told it in a way that made it entertaining. And also, I think it's important to go to book fairs and book festivals where the authors are speaking. And even if they're not memoirists, listen to what they're saying about the writing process. I went to the National Book Festival. I've been a couple years in a row. We live outside of Washington, D.C., but I remember the first time I went, when I got there, I said, "Well, I'm here because I want to hear authors speaking." So I just went into the first room where there was an author speaking, and it was Geraldine Brooks. And I had never heard of her before, but she's written so many award-winning books. She's a big name. And I remember someone asked her in the audience, they said, "What do you do about writer's block?" She said, "I don't have it." She said, "Writer's block? What does that mean?" She said, "Can a hairdresser have hair cutting block and decide, well, today I don't feel like cutting hair, so I'm not going to go into work?" And I thought, well, she's right. Why do we hide behind this thing called writer's block? Just sit down and write. Doesn't have to be in order or what you're doing. Just sit down and write. And sometimes when you just sit there, the things that come out of your head and your heart are the stories that need to be told. And they're buried in there and you don't even know because you haven't let them out because you're trying to be too structured about it. So that really stuck with me.
Let go of that structure. And I do feel that people nowadays going on the internet, how do I write a book? The answers that they're getting are set a 1 hour timer, do it every single day at the exact same time, which is just kind of the opposite advice for that we would suggest to people.
Yeah. I mean, especially for a memoirist who's writing about things that are raw and deep inside. Write when the time is right. Don't write because it's 5 a.m. and that's the buzzer you've set. That doesn't work. That puts pressure on you. Just sit down every day and write. Some days it might be for 4 or 5 hours. Some days it might just be for 15 minutes, but just sit down and write something.
Yeah. And when we're writing a memoir, it can wear you out and reopening old wounds.
Yes, it
Reopen
does.
for myself, I have children. If I was writing while they were awake, I would snap at them more. I would get angry
Yes.
at them more.
Yes. Yes.
When I was writing, it had to be at like 10 p.m. because I would get angry, I would cry, scream out, and then I would go to bed. And then I would wake up feeling like, okay, I can be a mom again and I can do these things.
Yes.
Not do mom and memoir at the same time.
Yes, that's right. And I think that's so important. You find what works in your life at the moment and give it that. And if it can only be 15 or 20 minutes, well, give it 15 or 20 minutes, but don't give it nothing because, one day you decide, I don't feel like writing today. And then the next day you go, oh, well, I didn't write yesterday. I think I'll have another day and then another day. And pretty soon you're months away from where you were. And you can't just pick up and start where you left off. You've got to go back and go through everything to get to the point you were at. So I think just committing to every day for however long you're able to, that you sit down and write. And sometimes I found when I was really stuck, I didn't sit down at the computer. I sat down with a journal and a pen because I think there's less pressure in writing in a journal than there is typing in your manuscript because, you have that frame of mind that this is my book and, this is going to go out into the world. So I got to be really careful about how I frame the words in here. And when you write in a journal, you don't have that. And then you can take the feelings that you read in what you wrote in your journal and you can go put them into your manuscript.
I love that. Let's go ahead and wrap up with just one idea or one piece of advice. If we're sitting in that moment of, I have to go from, I'm going to write my book someday to I am writing my book now and getting off that ledge, is there anything you would suggest to just get them going?
Oh, that's really tough. I think you can get so distracted by so many things. You can get distracted by what title am I going to give my book and what do I want my cover to look like? And those are just stalling tactics. Just sit down and write whatever comes to mind at that moment, put it on paper, whether it's paper on the computer or paper on your desk, but just put something down. And if you are stuck and you can't figure out what to do, Just start with once upon a time. And you come back later and edit it out. But once upon a time, is a great starting line. Just get started. Just put something down.
Thank you so much. That is such good advice. Everything you've shared with us today has been all these little golden nuggets, and you've blown my mind several times. So I'm very, very grateful for your time. If you could please share with everybody how they can find you, social
Sure.
media, site, your book.
Yeah. So my name is Toby, Toby, Dorr, Dorr. And so my social media is Toby Dorr or Toby Dorr author, depending on what platform it is. And my website is just tobydorr.com. My email address is toby@tobydorr.com. So all you got to remember is my name, and you can find me anywhere.
That's awesome. And then how can we find your book? Is it on your website? And
My book is on my website. It's also on Amazon, and it's called Living with Conviction.
beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your time with us
You're
today.
welcome. I really enjoyed being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us on this interview with Toby Dorr. And I do hope you will join us next week for another awesome interview. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Thank you so much. Bye.